to this open talk on the theme Dance and Words, Alternative Formats. My name is Hilde Borchgrevink. I am a writer and music and dance critic based in Oslo, Norway. And first, I would like to thank today's participants for accepting to join us today. Choreographer and MoveFest artistic director Jana Rysleva, dance artist Mette Edvardsen, and dance critic and writer Ka Bradley. And you will meet these people at different times during our talk. This talk is part of an ongoing collaboration between the initiative Performing Criticism Globally that I program, together with theatre critic Anette Therese Pettersen, who is also in the audience, and the editorial board of the Czech web magazine for dance criticism, Tanečné aktuality. Is that right, Lucy? And editor Lucia Yashi from Tanečné aktuality is with us here in the webinar, in the panel. And all this collaboration between the Czech Republic and Norway is supported by the EEA Grants Culture. So the purpose, this open talk is kind of opening or followed by a rewriting workshop in the coming weekend, also with the theme Dance and Words, Alternative Formats. And the participants of this workshop are also in the audience. Alternative Formats is the second talk and workshop in our collaboration. And each constellation of talk and workshop is connected to a dance festival that the participants in the workshop write about and around. And in this project, we have chosen festivals that are situated, maybe you could say in local communities, at least not in capitals and big cities, to see how that affects what the festival can be and do. So this time we are working with the Move Festival in Ostrava in the Czech Republic. So today's talk will have two parts that will connect the theme alternative formats in different ways. And at the end of each part, we will plan a small Q&A, and you can write your questions in the chat. So we will go through them afterwards. And this theme of alternative formats, dance and words, it first came to us as kind of a descriptive thing, I would say, like empirical and practical. We wanted to investigate how lockdowns and limitations imposed on all kinds of performing arts by the pandemic actually had affected the creative outputs of dance artists, dance critics, and the infrastructure around dance, like the Move Festival. And second, a more speculative approach maybe emerged, inspired by the fact that being prevented from working and expressing oneself in a conventional way might also spark creativity. And we wanted to create an open talk and a writing workshop about dance that could discuss and generate alternative formats of text that could transform criticism, formats of dance that could transform dance, and maybe formats of festivals that could change festivals a little bit. And we will start in the festival end. I'll give the word to Lucie, who will discuss alternative formats from the festival angle, together with Jana Rysleva from the Move Festival. And after their talk, I will introduce the second part, where Mette Edvardsen and Ka Bradley will share their writing practices and thoughts on writing and dance. So I'll give the word to you, Lucie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Lucie Hayashi, as you have heard, and I'm a Czech critic and manager. And I invited for this talk Jana Rysleva, who's an artistic director of the festival Move Fest, which is starting in a few days. She's also a dancer, a choreographer, performer, and she used to be my classmate as well at Academy of Performing Arts, where we met. And so now she's the director of this Move Festival, which has its 8th year this year. And actually this year is quite new in its form. And maybe I will let Jana to tell us what is so new this year and how does it differ from the few last years, because I think this is the key words of this talk.
So hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank you for organizing all this event, because it's important for all of us to move and open these topics. And yes, this year of MoveFest, it's very different. We are, for the first time, without any support of a cultural center, Kultur. So we are kind of homeless for this year, and it's opening a lot of good stuff, but also it's bringing a lot of difficulties and opening many questions how to solve and also how to face new things. So it's very different.
Yeah, I think we have to add that it was in 2011 when Jana was one part of the team who just built up this culture center in Ostrava Kultur. And under its roof, the festival has also begun after a few years. And now this place is closed, as I understood, and only the festival is going on by itself, right?
Well, we continue, we move. Ostrava was a part or was a project of the Cultural Center Kultur. We were continuing with the programming during the year and also holding workshops, and as a star was the festival, or as a highlight of the season was the festival. So we continue now with the Move platform. So we are programming the whole year, and now we are starting the festival in about one day.
It's festival of dance and performing arts, or what is the specific genre of this festival? Has it changed somehow from last year's?
The main focus didn't change, because we are very proud of that we balance the movement forms. That's why it's also called MoveFest. That we program physical theater, contemporary dance, and new circus in a very balanced way. So the audience can really touch each of these forms and formats.
So what does it mean to organize a festival without a roof over your head this year?
We actually started a bit with going outside and outdoors and site-specific already last year. So we had a tiny bit of practice before the corona, or through the corona has all started. But for this year, we really programmed everything. We have only one performance in a venue, but it's a venue really new and student venue. So it's also a new collaboration. We spread the festival to completely new places, which are not meant for the dance and performing at all. We are having, which is one, it's a factory which is still functioning. So you can see performance hangout of Eliška Bartnická in a really environment of daily work of a lot of people. Then also there is a piece performed in a kind of open space called Trojhary, and the piece, it's a treatment of remembering, which is about environmental issues, but you can see it in industrial connotation. So it also opens a new angle of view.
Yeah, maybe we should add to our listeners that Ostrava is a region in the eastern part of Czech Republic, which is very famous for its mining history and very industrial town. So it's very specific to, I think, to have art in these kinds of buildings and spaces. So what are the biggest hurdles to do everything outside and site-specific?
I would love to add one more thing, that Ostrava, it's an industrial city, but that's why we also picked the topic environment, ecology, and sustainability, because that's really in the opposite what Ostrava used to be, but now where it's turning. So we also use the art to name and show that this topic and this approach is possible. And sorry, I forgot the question now.
Yeah, what are the biggest obstacles or hurdles of being homeless?
Of course, the the biggest, it takes much more coordination and much more focus, because you don't have really the nest or the place where to come together, where to start from, but you really have to talk and prepare all the places. Then also, of course, there are some things like weather, which is kind of really hard to count with.
But it will be sunny this weekend, right?
But yes, I have decided that since Thursday it will be sunny and really nice temperature.
Yeah, we're looking forward. And to be this open space and site-specific, I guess it definitely brings some new challenges and maybe alternative formats of festivals. So let's get to the point. What are the new things that open for you in this state, maybe?
Of course, the biggest plus of this is well, yes, collaboration with the new places and also touching new type and new kind of audience, because of course when you are in the city center, when the artists are rehearsing the piece for 4 days, so they meet the normal or the citizens who would never go to the theater by themselves. But we picked the areas, for example, Komenského sady or Černá Louka, where a lot of moms with the kids are going to the playground. So they meet the artists on the way or passing, but they can be passing by, but it's also testing the art, if it's an artist, if it's strong enough that if the people really stop and start to watch and join.
So are all the productions for free, or do you have restricted areas with tickets?
Some of the productions are paid, and it's important to book the ticket ahead, because we picked special places like Ostravica Textilia, old shopping mall from 30s, which is locked and it's not possible to go without the ticket and without the permission. And then we have also public spaces like Peace, Johnny and Jenny, or trees, where it's possible to stop just by passing by, and it's for free, or it's optional to to contribute also financially.
So are you expecting all Ostrava to come to your festival, or what was the marketing of this event?
Of course, yes, there's a lot of stuff happening during this autumn everywhere. So we used this year as an opportunity to really bring the dance and movement community to get together. And of course, we used the traditional marketing, the social media and posters, but also we really strongly started to spread by word. So really to have ambassadors and to spread the word about the festival through people who are engaged, or through also their passion and focus.
Okay, and about the festivals, there are usually many workshops going on for kids or people who just come by, so on outlookers on the street. Is something like this happening there as well?
Workshops we are not having outdoors, but for this year we decided to take care more of our sustainability of work and bodies of dancers. So there is a really great workshop of Lukáš Bobalik working with the recycling in emotion, and how to also work with the burnout or burnout prevention in the movement. So that's for building and keeping health the dance community.
Yeah, and the public is also implanted in some talks after the performances, right? They can meet the artists.
And then we have really great talks called To Dizzy with after dance or after performance, and it's talks and discussions after almost each of the shows. So the audience can really get in touch with the artists and also really ask questions in a really friendly way.
Okay, to get a bridge to maybe to the next talk, I would love to ask you, because you're also an artist, a choreographer, performer. Do you feel this let's say, alternative style of festival brings some new challenges for the artists as well, or does it open some new perspective? Or what you have heard from your artists coming to you? How is the collaboration?
Well, it increases the energy, and the challenge is by placing the performances into new places and new spaces. So that's really great to see how the performance changed a bit, and also how each of the shows grows a bit on preparing and redoing it for a new space. And for me as an artist, I'm actually really looking forward to, or I really like to work outdoors and to see how this rehearsing in the public space, it's changing the city and the view of the citizens, that they can be really part of the rehearsal process. And it's also a bit unplugged and naked when they see the process of creation and not just the result. And as I said before, also it's a bit test if our vision and our focus is strong enough, because outside the audience can leave whenever they want. But if they stay during the whole piece, it's much stronger, because then we know they really wanted to stay, they really wanted to see.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe this just for introduction, but please stay online. And if there's any Q&A from anyone from public or from our attendees and listeners, please don't hesitate to ask, either to write into Q&As or I don't know what else they can do. They can raise a hand, right? If there is, but anyway, if you don't know now, you can keep your Q&As after the talk of Matt and Ka, and then we can get back.
I have a question actually, because I was curious whether I understand that since you don't have a space, you have to move out and work in public space. But did you also have to adjust some of the performances? I mean, did this situation kind of affect the performances that in itself? Did the artist have to change them?
Well, we had to change one piece, which was not possible to find a venue, and it really needed the venue, so we had to program something else. And then actually we have adjusted, or the artist, we have two pieces which they had to focus on changing a bit, and that's this treatment of remembering, which was played on the beautiful places in gardens of castles, and now they will be in this industrial area. So yeah, there are adjustments.
Okay, that sounds like a rather big adjustment actually, from gardens of castles. And
yes.
Yeah. And then I was also curious about this environmental theme, because, or do you how do you work with reaching out to the kind of industry, if there is an industrial audience in Ostrava? Do you work with kind of getting out, reaching out to them in some way, or is it just like it's the general ecological theme, and we hope that they will kind of get it somehow since it's outdoors?
Well, one of the lines was by programming that, for example, the performance trees, it's really a site-specific performance created in the park area, and it's an aerial performance held on trees. So they can get in touch how to see and observe art in completely new location and environment. And also the artists they really take care to be very kind to the trees and to the nature. So through their approach, also the kids or the audience can see how to take care of the park area themselves. So that's one of the options. And the other one, it's also the sustainability, how to apply that on ourselves, how to be kind to our body and how we are placed in that, and through digesting it through our body to approach also our surroundings.
Thank you.
Maybe Ka or Matt have a question, or we can leave it afterwards. Okay.
There's quite some things that resonate with me, but I have it's also a bit some things that I find a bit problematic. But I don't know if I should jump directly into that, or if that's something we can come back to. I don't know. Well, I mean, I find it, well, maybe I can just air these thoughts that I find it, there's something like as a field to think, there's something between to how far to how far are we willing to adapt ourselves constantly because because we have to, and when is that something that's generative to thinking differently? So for me, there's a little bit of a conflict there, and of course I find it extremely problematic to think in terms of letting a work to kind of test the work. If it's strong enough, you place it outside, and if it manages to catch the interest of the passersby and that they stay, then it's kind of like a proof to say that the artwork was strong enough. That's, of course, a very limited way of understanding how, in my view, how an artwork can interact with its audience. Kind of puts me in a difficult place. I don't know where I find myself most uneasy, thinking of myself as an artist or thinking of myself as an audience. That as an audience, I'm limited to kind of immediately confirming the work by, there's for me a real problem there. But then I'm also thinking of this idea of, I think it touches upon the question maybe that Hill was just asking, to what extent do we, and I think that we can think it outside of your context, maybe as a general question, how do we want that art works, or how do we want that art engages? Is it important that we find new audiences? In what way? How do we relate to a community? And in what way do we think ourselves as part of that community, or in what way do we reach out, or is it enough to just be there and do something, and that the work kind of works like that? Yeah, I don't know. There was there's maybe several threads. I'm trying to dismantle the kind of organize the threads a bit for myself here, but I don't know if you have some thoughts you want to share back immediately, but.
Well, the passing by a topic, it's actually like kind of one of the tests, or a bit like a lakmus paper to what's the, yeah, one of the tests, but of course it's not the only one. And especially some pieces also really needed the surrounding, the light, and this visuality, and it's completely all right. So I didn't want it to say that to put the movement material in the public space, it's, well, yeah, if to bring it this way on public space, and then it's say yes or no. Of course, it's this is not the way how to do it, but with some ideas, it's good to test it on a public space, and then maybe start to work from the feedback and to redo the piece a bit. Or it's completely different feedback from the audience on public spaces, and it's good to listen to it. That was all like one of the ideas. And then by touching the community, we usually are programming for the festival, or also for the all year programming, some participatory pieces. So the community, it's starting to be involved in the creation, and it gets in touch with the artists from abroad, or also when we are picking artists for the residency. So the community, it's involved also in the talks, and also seeing the process during the residency, or participates in the last showing if it's this participatory creation. So that was the threads I made a note, but there is of course more to open.
Thank you. Maybe if there is no more questions, we will just continue. And if someone thinks of a festival question in their head, it's just to pose it in the chat, and we can pick it up. So I will introduce go on to the next kind of part of the talk. As I said, we kind of went from this more descriptive way of thinking of alternative formats to a more speculative one, where we, since we were doing a writing workshop, we thought that maybe we can use all these limitations and pandemic limitations for something, and make the workshop about how we can develop what it is to write about dance. And then we mean writing about dance in a wide sense, like also the writing that choreographers and dancers do, because they're not only dance critics write, I mean also artists write. So we started to think that maybe the traditional panel talk could have a little bit of an alternative format too, in terms of that we decided to invite one dance artist and one critic to kind of share their practices on equal footing, and also invite one dance artist and one critic whose work is about writing and reading in some way, or where this is a central thing to their practice. So and this of course connects to the workshop, where we would like to discuss search for alternative formats of criticism and individual solutions to writing, because writing, regardless of genre, is a creative practice. And how could criticism explore other text form than the ordinary review? And could criticism be, for example, an essay or a short story, a poem, or even a format that doesn't yet have a name? And how does alternative formats of dance, like the open air things that Jana and Lucy discussed, how do they influence our writing? Because there is also, it's always interesting also how, I think, how the world kind of enters the text that you are working with when you write, and there is a connection there, which makes, you can't just choose a text form and then use that on anything. So we invited then dance artist Mette Edvardsen and dance critic and editor and writer Ka Bradley to talk with us. And I will now just briefly introduce you so that you don't have to do that yourself, and end with a question to each of you, and then we will take it from there, I think. Ka Bradley is a writer, critic, and editor working from the UK. And as an editor myself, I think editorial practice underlines how the creative act of writing is closely connected to the act of reading in a very interesting way. She's an associate editor at the Springback magazine and a commissioning editor at Penguin Press. But you also write fiction, and also something that you call narrative nonfiction that I'm curious to hear more about. But I would just say that one piece that caught my eye because of that the pandemic has framed all this, the planning of this workshop, was a piece that you wrote during the pandemic with no performances to follow, where you actually wrote a piece about a performance taking place outside your kitchen window. Could you tell me just a little bit more about that text, and what performance was that, and how did it come about?
So this came about at the very height of the UK lockdown, when we were all very strictly observing restrictions on movement. So I didn't really leave the house except for my government mandated walk for 1 hour every day. A lot of the outlets that I wrote for, the criticism outlets I wrote for, went into spirals of despair because they had no idea how they would review dance, how they would review theatre. When there was no dance, there was no theatre. A lot of critics began to look at themselves, me included, wondering, God, what is actually the point of me if I am just a kind of subsidiary organ to the performance world? What purpose am I serving actually? And so we started to think about how we could look at the world around us and apply the kind of critical thinking we'd been doing in the same way, in a way that was more engaging, in a way that suggested that our skills were not just subsidiary organs, that we were thinking about the world. So I looked out my kitchen window and there was a very exciting little group of cats. My next door neighbours had 8 different cats, each of whom had very distinctive personalities. When you are locked indoors, when you cannot move, when your life is in front of a computer every day, and the idea of 1 mile beyond your house is exquisitely far, suddenly the stage of a garden becomes the most brilliant and beautiful thing. So I wrote about these cats walking around the garden as if I was reviewing a play, a piece of immersive theatre. And this was fun because, it was partly a joke, like, oh dear, critics just can't stop criticizing. They just won't stop talking about theatre. But it also felt very, very fulfilling for me that it was possible to think about the world around me in terms of art and movement and joy in that movement, without it just being a surrounding. I hope you don't mind, but I read a piece by Mette called The Picture of a Stone. And there's a section that I've been, ever since I've read it, I felt very obsessed by, and I think it's going to completely change the way that I think about my own criticism. But that you say, I think dance is not primarily a visual art form. It is also about other senses and how the senses are working together, seeing, listening, feeling, but also remembering, imagining, and thinking. I have felt as if my brain has been exploded into separate parts by thinking about this, because of course, I have been interacting with art as a primarily visual form, but I haven't been feeling it as a primarily visual form. You're right, it is also about all the other senses, and it's about working backwards in my memory or forwards in my imagination at what I'm experiencing. And it's sort of, I feel like I'm undergoing a crisis right now. What I think criticism is for is rapidly changing.
I think that's a beautiful point to be in somehow. Even if it can be tiresome, it's also a place we should kind of seek. I think also to seek some risk in. And I somehow hate to interfere in my plan about to interfere in this beautiful comment with introducing with kind of information about Mette. But I think I should give you some. Mette Edvardsen is a choreographer and performer who works all over the world. She's Norwegian and now working from Norway, but has been working from Belgium for many years. Many of her works explore other media or other formats, but her interest is always in their relationship to performing arts as a practice and situation. And it was especially one of our projects that made us invite Mette for this talk, which is called Time Has Fallen Asleep in the Afternoon Sunshine, inspired by Ray Bradbury's novel Fahrenheit 541, where an underground community of people learn books by heart in order to preserve the books for the future. As an experienced performer, Mette is used to learning by heart, and in Time Has Fallen Asleep, a group of performers memorize a book of their choice. Together with these performers form a library collection consisting of living books, and visitors and audience can choose a living book they would like to read, and the living book will then bring its reader to a suitable place and recite its content and possibly valid interpretations. And as an audience, this is a very intimate and beautiful experience. And I personally particularly like also how it is room for failure in this situation and in the learning of the book. Sometimes the book forgets what it has been learning by heart, and it has to start anew from the last paragraph. And Mette has said that learning a book by heart could be seen as a way of rewriting that book, which also connects to the close connection of reading and writing that I was trying to talk about a little while ago. So during the pandemic, Mette, several planned performances of Time Has Fallen Asleep in the Afternoon Sunshine had to be cancelled. And this project has already had different formats, written and oral, but during the pandemic you changed the format of the project. Could you say a little bit about how you changed it and why?
Yes, so as we were all locked inside in different places and could not come together, the situation like the one we are in now, to meet on Zoom or Skype on the screen, was also proposed to us. When we do the project, a very common thing is, for example, that we meet in the library and we go together with so one book, as we call ourselves, and one reader. We sit somewhere and then we are, speaking to each other in a kind of close proximity. So there would be not so much a practical difficulty in doing it like this, that I would meet someone and then introduce myself and recite my content in this format. But it just felt so terribly wrong to do it in this way, to imagine that we would sit in our homes and speak to someone in what seemed, in our experience, is a very, what is the point of the work? Is it that we are speaking the words that we are speaking, or is there something else that is being created in that meeting? So from this, in the context where we had to cancel many of these readings, I proposed to rather do it then as in another way, that we would write it as letters, so that the audience, instead of showing up on a given time on Zoom, they would inscribe and give us their name and address, and then we would sit in our homes and write letters then addressed to the person, and writing down parts of our books by heart, and fold it, put it in envelopes, and on our little walks outside into the world, drop them in letter boxes. So these letters were then traveling around with the post, which was kind of another choreography, but also quite a challenging one. We came to realize, as a post was also not behaving very regularly. But anyway, it was another, I guess, another format or another continuation of the work, which on the one hand allowed us to continue, so to be, you know, close to the work and write and practice, and at the same time also to make some intimate encounters with readers in this other form.
It was a very nice experience. At least I received a letter from Marguerite Duras, the lover, and it was you could kind of follow it. It was a very physical experience to read. I think it was handwritten, and things were crossed out and restarted, and there were some arrows there moving some things around, and still it's also great literature. So of course you read the text also as a good text. But I think this is a good maybe this could also work as a going back to your beautiful quote, Ka, about dance not being just visual. There is this bodily experience all the time from different angles that we kind of register without kind of almost automatically. You can.
Well, I think this is the thing about moving from the space of an audience where you are sat and you're having a you know, kind of collective silent experience of looking at something on stage, and especially when you go in as a critic, I find I look at things very differently from a critical perspective and as an audience, just as an audience member. And I wish there was a way for me to marry those two points of view, because actually I think that dichotomy isn't really serving criticism, critical writing in general. What started to happen, as you might remember, over the lockdown, is that lots of dance companies started to live stream rehearsals, or they started showing performances that they'd had recorded. And suddenly that experience became very multitextual for me, because at the most basic level, I could do things like scrub backwards, watch 30 seconds again and again. And it became very much like a reading experience where you can flick back and forth through the pages, you can reread, you can rethink. As you were talking about the process of writing the letters and sending them, and it's not just reciting words, there's a kind of channel being set up there that invites further layers. I was thinking that of my copy of Bluets by Maggie Nelson is actually my friend's copy of Bluets of Maggie Nelson. And in addition to reading the text, which is just printed, I also have all of her marginal notes. Mm-hmm. And it's like a strangely romantic experience, actually, to have the kind of both physical writing, to know that someone has been there, has experienced this text alongside you, has experienced the putting down of these words, as well as, you know, the reading experience where you go back in time to where they were and when they were writing. I think it can really push your ideas of what the performance space is supposed to be and what time it's taking place in if imaginatively you can time travel.
Yeah, and I think there's also something of that body, which you know, whether that takes form in the book that you shared and with your friend and the notes that's on there, that this kind of, yeah, the body of a text or of you know, the space of the performance like this is so important to a kind of yeah, exchange or meeting or encounter with the work. And I think that's one of the things that for me, the idea of the Zoom kind of alienated me from the kind of physicality of the work, which is yeah.
Yeah, I would like.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was on the subject of, you know, text interacting with the performance and the moment of connection. How do you respond to the kind of review text, which is, I think, our big elephant in the room, the text that comes afterwards that is responding very much from the outside, often from you know, depending on the outlet that a critic is writing for, sometimes it can be from a very purely commercial perspective, you know, see this, don't see this, I like this, I didn't like this. And sometimes it can be more thoughtful and connective. Do you think there is a place that this critical text that comes afterwards can go?
Well, kind of an interesting observation that we made at some point, and I didn't kind of, I mean, it's not that I've gone so much further with it, but I'm thinking about it now, is that for this, in this particular situation, I realized that the reviews are very different. And there was a moment I was wondering, like, yeah, why is it that, I mean, one is that it seems to be a work that people like to write about. So it's not about liking the work or not liking the work, but that it is kind of opens a space for writing, and a bit more maybe, I mean, I shouldn't say that it is like that, but in my experience, it feels like it's more describing someone's experience than looking at something from the distance. So I was wondering, so maybe this could be a question back to you. I was wondering, and between us, we have been speaking about, like, if this is because the critic then in these situations are really inside of the experience. There's just you and the book, and so the experience you make is yours, of course, like it is in any other, you know, even if you would be in the theater, but that there is this kind of, there's nothing to zoom out and look at. I mean, yeah, you can zoom out and see the situation you're in with the reader, which is part of a larger situation, maybe in the library and other people walking around. But if this was what opened for a more kind of poetic or literary form of writing, as opposed to other reviews that I've had of in other works, yeah, I don't know if you could kind of imagine it, but of course there's also other reviews of other pieces that also can have this kind of quality, but it seemed to be really a tendency to that it changed the way of being reviewed, or yeah.
I really like the idea that a piece of art can provoke a new kind of critical reaction, just because I suppose it was because you were adapting to an unprecedented time. You were having to adapt an already, you know, very unprecedented artwork to an even more unprecedented time, that critics maybe felt they were able to respond in this more personal and more intimate way. yes, it would be nice to imagine. It would be nice to imagine. That's a very anodyne way of putting it. It would be exciting and hopefully challenging to imagine that criticism could respond, acknowledging the kind of necessary singularity and intimacy of an experience, because I think there is a tendency, perhaps a sometimes necessary tendency, for critical writing to take the outside perspective that maybe doesn't actually exist in reality, because as you say, every experience is individual and every experience is so intimate. I don't know if that does answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, the work itself, of course, started many years before this strange, last 2 years experience that we've been, or how long is it that we've been in? So it's kind of this observation goes further back in time, and maybe it's not important to conclude on anything. It's maybe it's nice that it's just noticing that, like, what kind of language does it lends itself to that, or opens up, or and how is it that one feels that it there's a choice of writing about work in a certain way as opposed to another. It's just interesting, I think. Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm always very relieved when the kind of midpoint of a conversation is not here is our conclusion, but rather here is something we're noticing. I like the idea that we are in the middle of a long narrative that will continue, that stretches back and is going forward. And we're not going to perfectly answer everything here.
Yeah. That's good.
I was a little curious about what you said, that you think differently when you're gonna as an audience and as a critic, because I recognize that very much myself, that there is some kind of light that is turned on in my head when I'm going when I know that I'm going to write about the performance. But it has also happened that I just went to a performance to see it, and then I just had to write the text.
Yeah. So I really don't. So when I joke about it with friends who don't write criticism, I say that my brain turns off when I'm not in my critic brain. Mm-hmm. But of course that's not true. What I mean is that I'm not sitting in the back seat of my own head trying to make observations, my little critical notebook, trying to write down things that are going to go into a review. Instead, I'm allowing myself to feel instinctively. I'm allowing myself to feel emotionally without immediately trying to frame that in a sentence. It sounds like a Zen saying, but I think a really fundamental part of writing is the moment where you don't have words, and the moment that it's just this kind of space of feeling and reacting and remembering and thinking. And I actually think that part of me is more valuable from an artistic standpoint. I think it's doing more engaging with an artwork than sometimes the critical brain does. And sometimes that's because the critical brain has to file 500 words in a couple of hours and is just rattling through its adjectives. But I would really I'd like to find a way to bring those brains together and to feel less pressured by I feel like this occurs across every industry, but to feel less pressured by deadlines.
Yeah, because I recognize it very much, but I also think it has, for me at least, it has something to do also with paying paying justice to the work in a way, because if I just let myself float around like as an audience and don't concentrate, I also miss things, of course, and miss more. So I think that if I were going to write a review or something that you did, Mette, and I really went into complete audience perspective, I would have the review would have been more partial. How would you think? I don't know. We haven't tested this, of course, but do you have any? How would you react to that? Would you feel that I didn't really do my job, or?
Are you speaking to me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I was wondering if it's thinking about like, or if this resonates with you, to think about reviewing as a kind of a conversation, so that it's even if it's not necessarily the normal conversation that someone says something and then someone else says something and then someone else says something again. Maybe we don't get that far into the conversation, but there is this kind of, I remember once having a review which was written in the form of a letter. And so, of course, the address, it was also kind of particular because it's like it's not addressed. I mean, yeah, in a sense, by being a letter, it's addressed to me. So, and it's a letter that I have not responded on. It doesn't need me to respond. It's kind of already in the way of speaking, proposing something else, and yes, I was thinking this as a way to, how is it that from a professional level that there is the artwork and then there's the critic, and kind of what kind of, how do they engage together, or how because I what I sense from what you're saying is like this kind of switching on is also a certain sense of responsibility, that you, like what you say, like you want to be, the good, you want to see what is there to see, like to be good somehow in being, I see it as a respectful responsibility.
Pay respect to the work in some way, and I just and I don't say it's because I recognize very much what Carl says about this critical brain irritates me many times, because it's like but I just wanted to bring this perspective on too, because it's also a positive force sometimes.
Yeah.
Force of attention that that I just know that if I'm not going to write, I'm much less attentive in a way, often.
Which is maybe also good.
Yeah.
I share my experience as well. I always feel like when I don't know that I will write a critique and then I write it, then I'm asked for it, or maybe I want to write it after, I have to count on my memory so much, and it's so I'm interpreting my memory and not the art. But when I know that I'm going to reflect the performance, so while watching it, I'm somehow imprinting it to my memory, and already I'm using words to have better imprint in it. So I formulate lots of words that stays with me, and if I'm just in the audience, I would say that I'm not switching on the word imprint memory and just having the emotion and then analyzing like already interpreted emotion from the art, which is totally different in many ways. So this is also like I totally relate with this switching on the brain and trying to memorize the thing that then I need to talk about or write or like do in any form. So perfectly understanding this. Thank you for the topic.
But it is interesting that all those words maybe closes us off from that experience that you talked about, Ka, that this more tactile, bodily way of experiencing.
In an ideal world, I'd like to have a brain like one of those Etch-a-Sketches where I can just delete it. So I would first write a review with my critic brain, the night afterwards, delete it. And then a week later, maybe I'd write a review of what my emotions were, more emotion impact, delete it. And maybe a year later, I'd do, a memory review. That's my ideal, 3-bar criticism. Unfortunately, I don't think that anyone's going to let me do that.
Oh, what a shame. That's great.
Yeah, but actually that's also it's a nice idea, because also this that's also a kind of a limiting format, this thing that you write one review, and of course, I mean, performances stay with you. and you think of them differently, and books stay with you, and you think of them differently in 2 weeks.
Actually, I do have a question for everyone who writes criticism, and that is, have you ever completely changed your mind on something you've written after you've written it, and then had it go out into the world? And how do you cope with that?
Do you mean after seeing the performance for the second time? Because that happens a lot.
Oh, actually, yes. If you see a performance for a second time, what does something change, and what do you do?
Yeah, because the energy or the artists and all the atmosphere, it can change a lot. And I think in this contemporary pieces, there is so much in the air, which is like it's the sixth sense or the energy between the artist and public. So and when it is something that is balancing on the edge, it can change a lot. But without seeing it for the second time, and yeah, well, then I maybe reflect my own words, but not really the emotion. I would say the emotion stays, but maybe, yeah, if I read the same review after a few months and I say, I didn't need to be so strict, maybe, but the emotion stays the same, I would say. Yeah, I don't know about others.
I've had at least one experience where I watched something for the second time and thought, oh God, I've changed my mind. I'd started this one piece I'm thinking of, I'd been very critical of, and then I watched it a second time and I was like, no, it was my fault. I was in the wrong place. I wasn't thinking properly. This piece is a masterpiece, which was good for me to have understood that I had made what I thought eventually was a critical mistake. I had misinterpreted. Less good for the artist who have got the less good version of me, unfortunately.
So did you write another critique then?
I wrote a personal post rather than which isn't quite the same, but yes, I did. I mean, I felt I had to acknowledge it somewhere.
Yeah, because I think it can happen, and it would be totally perfect if we also admit, like, yes, I saw it for the second time, and here is a new review because now I feel as a masterpiece, and it's totally human, it's normal, and it states that the art is living thing, and it can reflect with you about your state in mind, etc. So I would like that, actually. We should think about re-reviewing some reviews sometimes.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
That brings the review into the communication that or the kind of yeah. Did you say communication that you talked about?
Like the conversation.
Conversation, yeah. Because there's a possibility to continue. There is one saying something, responding, and then responding again.
I had this experience of I guess as a critic, or that's sometimes what one hates about critics, is when they describe the work, describe the piece, that you want the critic to say something else. But nevertheless, I had this very, this is maybe a question to you. Do you feel that from the practice of writing about work, I mean, surely it changes something, but do you have something that you could say about that? Like how it changes you as a viewer, as a reader? I'm thinking about, there was a moment when my child was very small, and I had to, I went to see performances on my own. And when I came home and I was sharing this with my partner, somehow to be able to engage in what it was I was sharing my experience of, I spent quite some time describing what I had seen, so that we could have some kind of common ground to the conversation. And I realized that how this, describing the work at certain moment, there's really like a sense of developing, it changes how I see sometimes, and also developing a language for, going into the details, or spending, and sometimes it would completely change my way of perceiving what I had experienced. So I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts?
This is exactly what happened to me when I started writing criticism. So when I first began, I was on a mentorship program at The Place in London, and I was mentored by Sandro Roy, who is a fantastic critic. We went to see a triple bill of contemporary dance. He sat me down afterwards and said, "Tell me what you saw." And I immediately began to tell him my interpretations of what I'd seen, what I thought the themes were, what I thought the choreographer was trying to tell me to feel. And he said, no, save that. Just tell me what you saw. And exactly this thing happened where I started to describe, moment by moment, movement by movement, what I'd seen. And I realized that, gosh, there was a key here that I'd missed. And as I kind of replayed it as like a verbally descriptive piece as well as a visually descriptive piece, I realized that perhaps my interpretations had been quite shallow, that I'd skimmed my interpretation off the top without really looking more deeply. So yes, I think that, describing what I've seen has been very helpful as a tool to get deeper into a piece. I do agree that reviews that are just descriptions of what has been seen are not particularly helpful artistically, or in terms of reviewing or in terms of expressing opinions to an audience. I think they're a good place to start, but not to stay with.
Yeah, there is something about the practice of describing that is necessary or nice to do, and then you have to just stop it and at the right time, and get to continue from there somehow. Because as an editor, I also remember that I'm not an editor right now, but I was for many years and publishing text every day about theater, dance, and music, and I remember sometimes the critics has completely forgotten to describe, and got directly into interpreting, and then of course for the artist that's okay because the artist knows what the artist has done, but for the readers, it can be like for your husband, it can be quite difficult if there is no description at all to kind of get into what it's about. But then you of course have the problem that at the moment you start describing, you also start selecting. So you select so something goes away and you focus on something, and yeah.
And I think also that sometimes in the moment of describing, it somehow reveals a little bit as well, what kind of words you choose, or where is it that you can really go into, details about something, which, I mean, can be good or bad. It just means that there is kind of some investment into it because you really dislike what it was, or you have much joy with it. But somehow I felt like, how that is sometimes also influencing or changing my experience. And this I quite enjoy, that how it is like me in the moment of how I'm living the time that it takes, the performance. So which brings me to, when does a piece end finally? And that's why I like what you said earlier, Ka, about this idea that you could, have these different moments in time when you are engaging with the work. Because I think that, exactly this experience of actually now when I'm speaking about it and I'm revisiting it, I'm seeing something else, or I'm thinking something else, or experiencing something else about it. So that's why I think that would be so great to have the possibility of reading a review that you write about something through time, or
Yeah, I think we should make this happen, actually.
Yeah.
This is the new review.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had also once an experience of a work that I remember in the moment I saw it, having not a good experience of, and then reading about it maybe 10 years later in an anthology, which was not really a review, but still kind of bringing me back to the performance. And so not that the text was valuing whether it was good or bad, but just by bringing me back to that space, to that memory. And I realized actually how much I remembered and how vivid the piece was for me in that place where I was 10 years later. I thought this, you know, it completely changed, like what was said earlier, like from something that was I totally dismissed to something being like a masterpiece. So yeah, this is super interesting how, you know, how also performance works or art works over time.
Yeah, in our bodies in a way. Because we, even though I understand your distinction, let's see, we always work with memory somehow. We can't escape that with performing arts. It's
And the imprint, like you said, the print that art has on us, and then we just share it through words or written words or maybe another artwork, etc. So it's also the personality who stands behind that. Yeah, we cannot escape this, I'm afraid, but we can. Yeah, somehow I feel that we can just maybe try to be more in there, to be more, I don't know if artistic, but more emotional, more straight, more me in my reviews. Sometimes I feel I should rewrite my review to be more me and not trying to fit in this critical style that we are used to have. And it's maybe about this, trying to look for alternative formats that speak actually our language.
Have you changed in that respect, Carl? Since you also write, I mean, fiction and things that are you.
Well, I think just from the process of this conversation, I feel like I'm going to go back to criticism and say we're not doing it this way anymore. we're doing the long review. Yes, so I used to partly when I'm given a long enough word count to. This is the other issue with reviews, of course. Sometimes you only get a limited number of words to say what you'd like to write an essay about. If I'm given more space, I inevitably pour more of me in there, and the response becomes, I hope, more creative and more of a kind of emotional and artistic engagement. Although, you know, I don't think any text I've ever written has met the exact qualities of a piece. I hope that it tries to rise there. Yeah, this then very much becomes a question of word counts and what criticism is for and how we're trying to engage the reader of criticism and what we want to do with it, what's its purpose. I could have dozens of crises over the course of a single day, but I'm feeling very optimistic right now. I feel like I feel very positive about what it might be able to do, what we could be adventurous for.
I had a little thought that it doesn't maybe fit exactly now, or maybe it does, I don't know, but at least I have to say it before you know, we leave for the day, was that when I read your text about the cats, the review, and maybe it connects to actually where we are now, because I had this, you know, when I was young, the musical Cats was one of my favorites. And I was, you know, recently joking to someone that I would love to make a version of that musical, but actually to have real cats on stage, and because in the piece I made 2 years ago, I tell the story about the cat, but one of the desires was that there would be a cat that would be in the theater. And a friend of mine told an anecdote about once trying to enter the theater and the cat had slipped in, and the whole kind of situation of trying to catch the cat to bring it out before the show could start. So this kind of uncontrollable element in the piece. And I was fantasizing about this cat being there, maybe sometimes walking around, and maybe sometimes we wouldn't even see it at all. Anyway, there was no cat, living cat in the piece, but so there was this fantasy of wouldn't it be amazing to be in the theater and have all these characters, cats, just, you know, doing the show basically. And I realized now that when I was reading your review, it's like the review exists before the performance was ever made. So maybe we are in some kind of past, future, present mix up.
Yeah, but the timelines are crossing.
Yeah.
I love that idea. There was a Canadian company who did Hamlet, but Hamlet was a chicken. Everyone else was a human, but just the character of Hamlet was a chicken. And I wish I'd seen this, because, as you say, that element of uncontrolled, like, you can't control an animal will do what it wants. You can sort of train it to, you know, be a chicken on stage during the soliloquy, but it will be a chicken. And I think that kind of invites a whole other aspect of engagement with the performance, because actually you're having to perform the part of an audience paying very close attention to these cats wandering around or to this chicken on stage. And I also think it involves a kind of courage on the part of the audience and the creator to just give themselves up to chaos, to potential chaos.
Yeah.
But I think there's also something of I mean, personally, I love the space of the theater so much. I'm not always working on that format, but there is something in these spaces that is, you know, there's a kind of a presence already generated just by, you know, coming together in such a, you know, convention or space. But so I'm kind of imagining that, you know, already being there together in a space like that, and you know, with cats or other animals for that matter. I mean, maybe there's like a if Peter Brook says that, you know, one man crossing stage while someone else is watching is enough to engage an act of theater, something like that. Mm. So maybe in my view, it feels like it's even before that. Just the fact that we are there, something is already starting.
Something's taking place. Yeah, I think, yeah, this is the thing that was really taken from us in the pandemic. And I think a lot of the alternative formats is a way to kind of to work out how we can bring people together in that way again, because like the presence of bodies showing up is so important. It's, to take a very far example, it's why you know, the physical act of protest, of people turning up at a protest and all these mass bodies in one place, something is happening. People have come together to say something. I think an audience can do the same. People come together to say, we want to see this, we want to be here. Yeah, how to do that when we are all trapped in our own spaces and can't mingle.
That's a very beautiful view on the audience, I think, or the idea of the audience. And we also have some questions from our audience. So maybe that's a nice bridge to that. There is a question from Regina Jansen to Ka. What is the difference for you to watch a performance as a member of the audience versus going in as a critic, that we talked a little bit about? But then she also asked something we maybe didn't talk so much about. Are we distinguishing between a critic and a reviewer?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. The difference between a critic and a reviewer. I'm going to say yes, just because I think it would be interesting to say yes and then divide those two. So I think when I am asked to review something, I'm often being asked to ultimately say to the readers of a magazine, go and see this, or don't go and see this. I sometimes feel slightly limited by the review format and the kind of ultimately what is the commercial nature of reviewing. It's, you know, the commercial nature of the theatre industry and the, you know, the reviewing industry, which I can't escape that. So as a reviewer, I feel like I am the voice of recommendation. I'm just assigning the stars. Again, something I hate doing. I hate star ratings. Whereas the word critic suggests to me something more of a critical response. It's unfortunate that in English, you know, criticize and critic have this very negative connotation, because I like to think of the role of a critic to be much more, as Mette said, this kind of conversation, and it is so much more satisfying and I think artistically necessary for that space to exist. That's a very interesting question, because now I have to think about not only the difference between my audience brain and my critic brain, but my critic brain and my reviewer brain. There's a lot of
I have a suggestion. I argumented for myself that when I'm writing a critique, I'm provoking a critical thinking of the readers. When I'm writing review, I say like, I like it, I don't, and why. But when I'm writing a critique, then I'm also somehow addressing the readers to like start up their critical brain, not in the negative sense, but just to get wider.
Engaged. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna steal that.
And when would you choose one versus the other then? Like,
I think, horribly pragmatically, it would be a matter of what my remit was for what I was writing for and the word count. I hate that it keeps coming back to something as small as a word count and as small as my instructions, but in an ideal world, I would always be a critic, but I think sometimes I necessarily have to be a reviewer.
Yeah, it's also time and money and I mean also time in the perspective of how fast it has to be up or published, because if you want to write a good critique, you cannot have just 2 days or 3 days to do that.
This is why we need our long-running criticism.
But yeah, the deleting processes of the first critic, second critic, the emotion critic, that you had to write 10 reviews to write one critique.
But it's also, of course, a question of what you choose to be your practice in a way, but which of course cannot. That's also a kind of a, how to say. Well, not everyone can choose that. But I think that I'm working a little bit in between. I do opera criticism more or less, and not very much more than that. I like to have that critical practice, but I don't think I could have been a critic like 24/7. And that implies that I say no when people ask me to write those super short critics in daily newspapers. That I just don't do it, because I don't like it, and I don't think I do it very well. I need the long format in a way. But of course it's a privilege. It's a privileged thing to be able to choose in a way. Maybe. There is another question too that we maybe will take one more before we leave. From Flamen Harmandjev. A question to everyone. Since we have been experiencing performance within the languages of new medias and situations and spaces, are we obliged to reflect this in the search of new situations, forms for criticism as well? So it's kind of a questioning the whole project of alternative formats, which I kind of like as a critical move. I don't know if anyone would like to answer.
I mean, I'd like to say that yes, I think we should be obliged. It's just a matter of how this sounds very cowardly of me. How do we begin? How do we begin? Where do we begin? What should critics be doing that is as courageously reflective of these new languages and these new performances as the performers? Because regrettably, I think we do. I personally do sometimes fall back on a very easy, familiar style.
I agree, and I kind of also think that we, yeah, this falling back on style is very easy, and it happens not only in text, it happens in art too. So it's a question that kind of contains both an artistic practice and a critical practice. Because the moment thing becomes predictable, talking about the cat running around in the theater space, the moment things become kind of stiffens into a style and becomes predictable, it also becomes less, I don't know, it doesn't, it loses its criticality, I think, somehow. So
yeah, I mean, in relation to art practice, I mean, I cannot really say from the point of view of the critic, but I think also this relation to the new formats, what does that also ask of us? Is it merely a, you know, translation of something that because we cannot do it like this, we now do it like that, and without further questioning, or to what like how is it that I'm not speaking about the very first things where we all try to help each other out and make something nice, even if it wasn't, I mean, that's of course you know, an act of solidarity maybe as well, and you know, that's we are in another place now, but where you quickly see where is it that you know, certain formats are being adopted because there's opportunities in that, and then how are we critical in our arts practice towards you know, what it means to do that, and how we treat the different medias that we are working with, and to what extent that's really the you know, a format that we are yeah, exploring or working on. I was particularly thinking about you know, that this kind of discovering a new media that was at certain moment you know, a thing, where I also somehow felt like, but it's also a bit strange. It's not really a new media. It's just we have not been exploring it before. As gamers have been busy with this for a long time, and all of a sudden it's like a new thing in our scene, and somehow the, you know, on the positive side, the kind of you know, nice discovery of something, and on the other side, is slight arrogance as well towards a field that is already invested in or explored by others before. So yeah, there's lots of and also, to what extent do we feel as artists obliged to do that? Do you have to say yes to stream a performance? I mean, there's all kinds of other issues around that, apart from just the discovery of the new.
Yes, maybe there is 1 minute left, so maybe maybe we should. That's a possible place to wrap it up. It's always difficult to find the perfect kind of endpoint. But...
So can we also jump to the questions for Jana that were there in the beginning from Regina? About the site
yeah, that, because I thought that the question of about description we talked very much about, so I think we'll pass that. But the first one, yeah, Regina had a question for Jana.
Yeah, there was this Regina asking about where the performance is adapted to site-specific context, or were they created specifically for the location. And maybe we can connect it with the second one. What was the focus or goal of the makers while working on the site-specific performance? So maybe maybe it's also for Matt, but from the artists, how do they work while working site-specifically?
Yeah, but let Jana, I think Jana could answer.
Well, for the festival, most of the performances were adapted to the site-specific format and adapted to the location. And that was more a question of money, that we usually are having a site-specific performance created especially for the location, but it couldn't really happen this year money-wise. And then the goal for creation, we usually like pick the location, goes from the history, or if we pick I don't know, house which need a renovation, or to point out what's the issue, or what we want, or to start the goal. It's actually start some change if we start to do this, or if we do the site-specific performance at some place.
Thank you. Then we have come to an end, I think. I'm so super grateful that you had time and wanted to share this time with us, even though it's digital, and we would have loved to sit in the same room.